At 0917 local time, an Australian patrol aircraft nearly collided with China's most advanced fighter at a combined speed just under 1,000 miles per hour. The margin between intimidation and catastrophe was less than half a second. Wake turbulence slammed into the aircraft so violently, the autopilot disconnected instantly. Engines coughed. Warning tones filled the cockpit. The airframe flexed as invisible forces rolled through it. For a brief moment, two modern military aircraft occupied the same airspace with no margin left for error. But this was not an accident. What the Chinese pilot believed was a warning shot was, in reality, the worst possible mistake he could have made, because every aggressive maneuver, every radar pulse, and every second of proximity was being recorded, analyzed, and transmitted in real time. By the time this encounter ended, Australia would know more about China's Su-35 than years of satellites ever could. And the pilot delivering the message would never realize he was losing until it was already over. The Australian P-8A Poseidon had been flying a standard maritime reconnaissance mission south of the Paracel Islands, cruising at 21,000 feet over international airspace. This was not a show of force, not a provocation, not a special operation. It was routine. 4-hour endurance profile, predictable racetrack pattern, sensors quietly harvesting electromagnetic activity across the region. For more than 2 hours, nothing unusual happened. Radar emissions were logged. Communications traffic matched historical baselines. No surface contacts of interest. To an outside observer, the mission would have looked boring. To intelligence analysts, it was valuable. Then Beijing decided to be seen. Without warning, and Su-35 burst through the cloud layer ahead of the Poseidon, twin engines surging into full afterburner as the fighter accelerated toward the patrol aircraft at nearly the speed of sound. This was not a casual intercept. It was deliberate. The fighter crossed the Poseidon's nose at a distance of just 600 feet, close enough that the Australians could see the pilot's helmet pivot inside the canopy. At their combined closure rate, just under 1,000 miles per hour, the margin between intimidation and mid-air collision was measured in fractions of a second. The physics arrived immediately. Wake turbulence rolled off the fighter's wings like a solid wall. The 190,000-pound Poseidon lurched violently to the left. Autopilot disengaged, stick shaker activated. Disrupted airflow surged through the turbofan intakes, causing momentary compressor instability. The pilots fought the aircraft level, muscle memory taking over as control inputs lagged behind physics. This was the first test. The Poseidon passed. Then the encounter shifted from physical danger to something far more valuable. The electronic support measures panel lit up. An X-band fire control radar had locked onto the Poseidon. This was not a background search sweep, not a warning scan. Fire control radar concentrates energy on a single target, the difference between illuminating a room and drilling into one specific point with a laser. The Chinese pilot believed this was pressure. Inside the Poseidon, it was recognized instantly as opportunity. Those smooth bulges along the aircraft's fuselage were not decorative. They housed the AN/ALQ-2-40 electronic support suite, a system designed to vacuum up hostile emissions, break them apart, and transmit the results in real time. The moment the radar painted them, the system began cataloging frequencies, pulse repetition intervals, scan modes, and power outputs. Every characteristic mattered, and every characteristic was now leaving the battle space via encrypted satellite link, streaming directly to Australian intelligence. Data that Chinese and Russian engineers had spent decades protecting was being harvested in seconds. The Poseidon did not maneuver. It held altitude, held heading, held speed. That calm was deliberate. The Su-35 returned. This time, it slid into close formation on the Poseidon's left wing, easing into position just 130 feet away, matching speed at 440 knots. From the outside, the image looked dominant. A heavy fighter shadowing a lumbering patrol aircraft at arm's length. From the inside, it looked like a controlled experiment. The Poseidon's MX-20 HD electro-optical turret rotated smoothly into position, recording at maximum resolution. Every panel seen, every weapons pylon, every maintenance access point. Infrared sensors mapped heat signatures across the entire airframe, engine exhaust temperatures, avionics hotspots, even the faint warmth of hydraulic lines beneath the skin. This information would later tell Australian engineers exactly where future missiles should aim. The Chinese pilot escalated again. Thrust vectoring engaged. Exhaust nozzles pivoted constantly, making micro-adjustments independent of airspeed. The Su-35 stabilized effortlessly in turbulent air that would have unsettled conventional fighters. Impressive engineering, completely documented. Sensor operators logged nozzle deflection angles, response delays, correction patterns. In a future engagement, Australian electronic warfare systems would know exactly how the aircraft stabilized itself and exactly how to interfere with that process. Then came the maneuver designed to impress. The fighter pitched up, climbed 500 feet, and rolled inverted directly above the Poseidon. For 2 full seconds, 42,000 pounds of fighter hung upside down at 440 knots. Aerodynamically, it should have been impossible. But thrust vectoring is not aerodynamics. It is brute force and mathematics. Flight computers solving physics equations hundreds of times per second to keep the aircraft from tumbling out of control. Australian analysts had theorized about this capability for years. Now they had proof. The Su-35 carved a perfect barrel roll around the Poseidon, tracing a cylinder in the sky with the patrol aircraft at its center. As it passed the tail, the gap narrowed to just 65 feet, close enough for cameras to capture individual rivet lines. One miscalculation would have sheared the Poseidon's tail away. Instead, the maneuver completed cleanly and completely recorded. The fighter had demonstrated mastery. It had also revealed its limits. Then the Chinese pilot attempted something riskier. Accelerating ahead, the Su-35 climbed slightly and chopped throttles to idle. Speed collapsed from 440 knots to 250 in seconds. For the Poseidon crew, it was like watching a sports car slam its brakes on a highway directly in front of a semi-truck. Closure rate spiked. Collision warnings filled the cockpit. The Poseidon throttled back hard, but turbofan engines obey slower physics. Thousands of pounds of rotating titanium took seconds to respond. What the Chinese pilot believed was a trap was actually another intelligence stream. Engine spool down time, minimum controllable airspeed, energy bleed curves, numbers that would later define exactly how to force an Su-35 into an energy trap during real combat. At the last moment, the fighter dove away beneath the Poseidon with just 130 feet to spare. Jet wash slammed into the patrol aircraft. One engine flamed out, the other surged violently. Still, the mission continued. Then came the final escalation. The Su-35 climbed ahead once more and armed its countermeasures. UV-26 flare dispensers spun up, positioned deliberately in front of the Poseidon's flight path. Burning magnesium entering turbofan intakes could cripple both engines. The Australian crew did not flinch. They adjusted sensors, flare characteristics, burn temperature, spectral signature, dispersion pattern, are among the most closely guarded secrets in modern air combat. Missiles are programmed around them. The Chinese pilot released all 48 flares. In seconds, decades of classified engineering burned brightly in front of Australian cameras. Both Poseidon engines faltered, airspeed dropped, altitude bled away. The aircraft shuddered, fighting gravity and physics at the edge of its envelope. But the data was already gone. Transmitted, analyzed, shared. The Poseidon limped home hours later, damaged but intact. Within 24 hours, the intelligence had propagated across Allied networks, radar frequencies cataloged, thrust vectoring envelopes mapped, countermeasure signatures compromised, pilot behavior patterns documented. More importantly, the encounter rewrote assumptions. Training syllabi would change, simulation parameters would be updated, threat libraries would be refined. From that moment forward, every Su-35 would be a little less unknown, a little less unpredictable, and a little less dominant than it had been the day before. Beijing believed it had delivered a warning. What it actually delivered was a complete operating profile of its most advanced fighter, handed over in real time by the pilot flying it. An expensive mistake, because what followed did not end when the aircraft separated. As the Su-35 turned away and disappeared into cloud, The data it had exposed kept moving, not at hundreds of knots, but at the speed of light. Within minutes, analysts were replaying the encounter frame by frame. Radar emissions were overlaid against historical baselines. Thrust vectoring behavior was compared against simulation models that had previously relied on theory and assumption. Countermeasure signatures were broken down into spectral fingerprints precise enough to be written directly into missile guidance software. This was not footage, it was a blueprint. And blueprints do not stay theoretical. They are tested, refined, and quietly distributed. Wargames would be rerun with new parameters. Simulators would behave differently. Threat libraries would update without explanation. Somewhere, pilots would train against an aircraft that no longer held the same mystery it once did. Patterns emerged quickly. The fighter's energy limits, its control laws under stress. The moment confidence gave way to constraint, even pilot behavior was logged. How risk was managed, how escalation was chosen, how dominance was attempted. Because modern air combat is decided long before missiles fly. It is decided in databases, algorithms, and systems that know an aircraft better than the pilot inside it. Somewhere in a future conflict, a warning tone will sound. A missile will ignore a flare it was never meant to recognize. A maneuver that once worked will fail. And the pilot will never know the outcome was shaped years earlier, on a clear day over international waters. An expensive mistake. Bye for now.